Hello YouTube, hello everyone, and once again, please welcome back my regular guests, Coqui Pirate.
Hello, hello.
And James.
Hello there, this is James S. Clark at James 1978.
And I'm going to start with a somewhat belated tribute to the late, great Jane Baker of Pip and Jane Baker fame. They wrote several classic series adventures, including creating the character of the Rani. And Jane Baker was one of very few women to have written for Doctor Who, at least the canonical television series. And I think she was always in a writing partnership with Pip Baker or Philip Baker, and condolences to him. She also wrote for Space 1999 and would go on to write a show for Children's Hour called What on Earth. James, do you remember What on Earth?
The name rings a bell. But
it was sort of an English Mork, kind of, yeah. But it was on sort of after Blue Peter or something. It was that kind of time slot. And yes, she worked on that. And when it comes to Doctor Who, I think Pip and Jane Baker are kind of underappreciated. What people don't realise is that when it came to Trial of a Time Lord, most of it was meant to be written by Robert Holmes, one of the greatest Doctor Who writers of the classic series, who sadly died. And so you've literally got the producer writing bits, the script editor writing bits, the cast improvising stuff. And when it came to the two-part finale, not only did Pip and Jane Baker have to write it, at the drop of a hat, they legally weren't allowed to see Robert Holmes's notes. Some stupid legal contractual thing. So, as you, James, would put it, spit and bacon grease. And if you consider, what happened, which no one could have foreseen and was very tragic, the end of Trial of a Time Lord, I don't think anybody could have written it any better. I even actually think a lot of writers would have done a worse job under those circumstances. So thank you, Jane Baker, and well done. And now on with another story, which by coincidence is actually written by a married couple. Leslie Scott being the first woman to be credited with any writing on Doctor Who. Actually, let me just get this up. What were the writers' names? I think it's the only one that they ever did. That was Paul Erickson and his wife, Leslie Scott. And the director, Michael Emerson, another piece of interesting trivia, was actually fired. I think it's the first Doctor Who sacking. And he directed the fourth and final part knowing he'd been fired. And I don't really know why, because I don't think the Ark looks especially poorly directed. But I know his career did recover. Maybe he was just difficult to work with at the time. As for this story, I'm one of those fans, and it's a popular opinion. If you see it when you're a kid, you think it's awesome. When you look back as an adult, you kind of see the cliquey things. Things to like about it, I love the cliffhanger to part 2. And as they pointed out on Doing Doctor Who, if you were watching this at the time, you might have thought it was a 2-parter. Just a not very eventful one, where they cause a disease, then cure it, and then go away. So that cliffhanger would have been like, wait, what? This isn't over? I think there is a sort of sense of wonder. I actually like a lot of the visual effects a great deal. Although, oddly, I think my favourite one is when they have what looks like a bowl of soup and they add a tablet or something and it becomes a bucket of wings or something. There were great kind of moments in this serial. I won't say it's the best Hartnell. I don't think it's the worst. I think it's a bit quaint, it's a bit twee, but I do think it's very enjoyable. And, as ever, Coqui, you have just watched The Ark for the first time. Your opinion?
At the beginning, I felt like I was really going to like this. I really liked the environment. I like it when, granted, I suppose this is a very expensive taste, especially given the time. But, the fact that they created this sort of environment that it's like, they have these different animals. So, at first I thought that, this is going to be really cool. And you have Dodo, is that what she goes by?
Yeah.
Just being rather dim, you know. She's like, oh, I'm in the zoo or whatever. And granted, you know, they're all in denial at first, but you know, while Steven did it to the point that he could be our stand-in, Dodo did it to the point of just ridiculousness. I also liked the Guardians, or the humans, or the Guardians. Does it refer to all of the people, or does it refer to just a few of the people that aren't
the people who are conscious, the people who are actually operating the ship are the Guardians, so, hence the name Guardian. Then they are charged with protecting the Ark, protecting the legacy of humanity.
Okay.
You never actually see them deminiaturize anybody, do you?
No.
Well, no. Well, not. They will once they get down to Earth, but to the planet.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked the Guardians. How, you know, they had interesting clothing, they had an interesting culture. I mean, given how far into the future they are, they had a very sort of primitive mob-like mindset, which I guess was a bit jarring. I mean, I guess we can regress, or I guess I shouldn't view it as something linear that you can either go forward or backward. We could go in a different direction with our social
Stephen, one of the best lines in the serial, Stephen did actually point out, well, this just shows no matter how advanced humans have become, we are still the same. We still fear the unknown. We still fear anything that is different.
Yeah, I would say that they were worse than we are, and probably worse than people of the 1960s, though, which is why it's just like, But, yeah, I liked the culture. I guess after a while, I got tired of the corridors. I liked the new world, the other planet, and I really liked that, you know, they had this sort of invisible, you know, I'm someone who can really appreciate effort being put into the world, which is also why I'm highly critical of, you know, scenes like in The Chase that they have like a wall with the backgrounds painted on. It's just like, what? But you know, they made a lot of touches to you know, make the alien world seem alien while at the same time looking familiar enough to want to live on it, and making the Ark look, you know, like it's this amazing project people underwent with diverse kinds of animals. It still kind of annoys me how they use the term life when they're referring to, I'm not even sure if they're referring to animal life as so much as they're referring to human being type organisms.
Yeah.
But yeah, all in all, good presentation. The story got a little boring to me, though, and I thought they were really setting something up with the Doctor, you know, not doing that much scientific rigor, making sure that the antidote works, like the Doctor was going to make them more sick or something. But he apparently just sat their will over hundreds of years of time, and apparently that's not going to affect Steven. And granted, a mutation probably occurs within a specific individual, but then how would it affect all of the Guardians? It was just very confusing. I don't know. Not confusing, it just seemed like very contrived, as opposed to, you know, the antidote just being worse than the cure. I thought they were going to come back and everyone was dead, which I thought would have been a more interesting conclusion, and maybe, you know, these creatures evolved, but
it feels like the second half needed more work, that maybe this was a bit of a rushed script. And it's a bit odd that is Refusius really the only planet that's habitable for them? Because like, they're going there when they seem convinced that they're not going to get a very friendly reception. Like, you're spies sent by the Refusians. Right? So you think that the Refusians know that you're coming and they don't want you. So you're not going to like try and look for another habitable planet.
So, just to answer that, Alex, first of all, it's the only habitable Earth-like planet which they can examine within range. Again, 10 million years in the future, you would have thought that Earth would have had an empire by now, colonised other planets, moved away from Earth, etc., etc. Or at the very least, have the technology to be able to study other planets at a greater range with greater accuracy, to be able to tell, is there sentient life on this planet? What are the species on this planet before we just spend 700 years going there? You know, do a survey before you buy the house.
It should be noted. Oh, go ahead.
And the whole, you're Refusian spies, that was an assumption based on plausibility, or complete implausibility. Earth was dead. Earth was destroyed. All humans, except for the Guardians, were now in micro-storage. How could 3 people come on board the ship in a wooden box? It was so fantastical. The only plausible explanation was that somehow people on Refusia had found out that they were coming there, and there were spies sent to destroy them. Again, when you break the logic down in that kind of way, it does make sense. Although at that point it wasn't a trope or a cliche. Now it is a trope or a cliche. A cliche. The second in command, being the suspicious, hostile xenophobe, whilst the leader is much more welcoming, etc. There are several episodes of Stargate SG-1, for example, which follow this exact same trope. Red Sky and what was it? I can't remember the other title. I can't remember the titles off the top of my head, but that. And Coqui, is there anything else you wanted to say before I start giving my own opinion?
Well, I was just going to say that it should be noted that I forget the other species names, the eyeball ones. What were they called again?
Monoids.
Yeah.
Monoids, yeah. They were fully aware of the possibility that Refusius was no good and that they'd have to retreat and look for another planet. So it's not that it was the only one. It was just the most, like you, James said, the one within range. Because otherwise, they just throw their hands up in the air and, either say we're going to have to take this planet or die. But they're like, no, we'll go back to the Ark. So clearly they did have the idea of possibly looking for another planet. That being said, if they have the Ark, do they even need a planet?
I wondered about that, because you've got, like I said, the kind of presumably stored food that they can just make out of nothing. But if you could have a zoo or menagerie, sure, you can have hydroponics. I imagine it would be a bit like Babylon 5, that there's some processed, like, freeze-dried food, but you can grow some things on there.
The point, though, you're both forgetting is there are billions of people in micro-storage.
Yes, that's it, of course.
And that's a very efficient way to live, I might add. Don't have to eat much, just think.
Well, yeah.
But again, what's the point of saving the human race if you're just going to keep them in the files for the rest of eternity?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, they'd have to be stored, but yeah, and I guess this is more thinking about elements that aren't in the show themselves. So this is a bit more trying to breathe logic into a fantastical 60s sci-fi thing. But, they can, I'm sure they have the equipment to extract the metals and elements that they need from asteroids or uninhabitable planets and expand the Ark over time.
You'd think they'd develop terraforming equipment, wouldn't you? But
I mean, not even necessarily terraforming. Even if they have to live in that Ark, they can make another Ark and just have bubbles all over an uninhabitable planet.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, and actually that's the thing. When they went on Refugius, I would think that instead of looking for the bomb, they would just take all of the miniaturized people and fly to Refugius and, let them out, even if they're miniaturized. But yeah. There's all of the possibilities that they don't consider, I guess, is kind of something that came to my mind a lot when I was watching this.
And before I hand over to James, I'm going to make one observation, which is I remember thinking this time around, if I'd been on the Ark, I'd have deliberately committed a crime, hopefully not good enough to be not bad enough to be executed for, to be miniaturized, because I wouldn't want to be born, live my entire life, and die on a spaceship. Spaceships, nice places to visit. Wouldn't want to live my whole life there. So yeah, I would have
gone... Well,
that's
the thing. You wouldn't have volunteered to be a Guardian in the first place.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Okay, James?
Hold on, but are they, in stasis? I'd imagine they're still living their lives in the spaceship. They're just tiny.
No, they're in stasis.
So that they're like freeze-dried people who have to be...
You've got...
a bit like...
What,
yeah.
Coqui, what is... your idea about no, we could just build many arcs and then use the same technology to do to colonize an uninhabited planet. Okay, thinking outside the box. And secondly, they actually explain the person who was guilty of the Guardian who was guilty of gross negligence. They're going to miniaturize him and then reinstate him, make him full size again, reactivate him 700 years later. So, no, this idea of yours that they're actually alive, living in these little trays in their own miniature little cities.
I just think, it's not really a punishment. It's more that they think, okay, this guy's a bit incompetent. He endangered everybody.
Exactly. Hence,
not fit to be a Guardian.
Exactly. Hence, sentencing him to miniaturization instead of death. Again, it's and the problem being that now he has sacrificed his life, in inverted commas, meaning his friends, his relationships, the woman he was quite fond of. He's going to wake up 700 years later, not knowing anyone, or not having anything. You see.
You'd think someone in love with him would volunteer to be frozen as well.
Yeah, but that's the problem, though. They've also volunteered to be Guardians. They did actually point that out. Everyone has their allotted task. The fact that this one guy is being put into stasis, his negligence was so massive it would have destroyed the entire ship. Someone else taking over his job, his position would already be a massive strain on the ship, on the society. So for two of them to go, it would have been even worse. Of course, during the voyage, as is shown in episodes 3 and 4, most of the ship became automated. Again, you're 10 million years in the future. That level of automation, sentience computers, etc., can't think of that. If only Coqui had been writing this episode with his miniature cities and terraforming uninhabited planets with domes. It would
all sorted. There wouldn't be an episode. That's the thing. The whole thing just seems so... Oh, and also, apparently the entire history of the universe is the first segment of time, and the couple of million years after that is makes up the other 51. That's something I didn't get. But yeah.
But you, James, your general thoughts on this episode?
Overall, there are so many things to say. First of all, it's a great example of the where are we, what is this place, introduction to a new world. It's a jungle with a steel sky. Remember, this is 1960s. We've got this is the 1960s. Since then, there have been so many arcs in space. The term has become redundant. It has become a cliche. But back then, the idea of humans building a massive city and nature preserve in space, freeze-drying the entire human race and travelling to another planet to start again. That was big picture thinking. That was...
Yeah.
And also, as Coqui put it, to get all of the animals to get... to do so much to make it look real, when in the past, it has been... episodes have been put together with spit and bacon grease.
Yeah.
That was a major vision. It's probably the reason why the husband and wife writing team were never brought back. So the Doctor fights with a solid gold fighter jet. No. And then he burns the BBC's entire budget in order to... No, but then moving on. It's also one of the first examples, one of the very rare examples of, hey, you're travelling to a quote-unquote alien civilization, even though the Guardians are humans. It is an alien culture. It is an alien physiology. What about the diseases that you're going to bring? That is something that is very rarely considered. It was only considered in one episode of Stargate SG-1. It's also discussed in Babylon 5, but it doesn't actually show. Yes, you come out of your hermetically sealed vessel into another one, and yes, creatures with no immunity to your mild little cold start dying. So that was a major insight into things like space travel. No, we're not just harmlessly travelling between the stars. Next, on top of this, the monoids, not only the species themselves, but the lengths that the Guardians took to include monoids in every aspect of their society, including, I don't know if you noticed, Alex or Coqui, having sign language interpreters at the trial and at the council meeting. The monoids themselves having a representative who spoke through a sign language interpreter in order to be a part of the trial of the person at the very beginning, the Guardian at the very beginning, who was guilty of gross negligence. So far from being... my first impression was far from being servants or slaves. They were fully integrated into the society as much as they could be without having human speech. But again, the other point is, check your privilege, James, because just because I don't see oppression doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Then, having cured the virus, they leave in the TARDIS. There's a problem with the gravitation or what have you. They come back 700 years later, so they've seen the beginning of the voyage and the end. They've arrived at the end of the voyage. This is also one of the only instances in which we see the Doctor or anyone else who arrives, does good, and then goes away again. This is one of the few times we ever see the consequences. This is one of the few times we ever see before and after. It's not just the White Knight rides in, saves the day, and then rides off into the sunset. What actually happens when you play God. And Coqui, you misunderstood what they meant when they talked about a mutation. The virus mutated. So from what I gather, the virus mutated so that instead of being a respiratory virus, it slowly attacked the brain. There's toxoplasm. There's a parasite in cats, for example. In cats' feces, for example, which, when it infects rats, makes rats cease to fear cats. So that when the cats kill and eat the rats, the circle of life continues. It's a bizarre evolution, but viruses, parasites, etc., can affect the brain in that kind of way. So yes, it is difficult to imagine, especially given, as I say, the major not concessions, but all of the work that the Guardians did to include the monoids in their society. So many of them knowing sign language, etc. It's difficult to imagine the monoids being embittered enough and oppressed enough and angry enough to support one in a full-scale armed rebellion. But obviously in this episode, that's what's happened. It's quite lazy. The oppressed rise up. Well, no, not necessarily. Again, in this kind of society, especially, the monoids would have asked for more and more rights, and especially if all of the if at least the majority of the people were as enlightened and as progressive as the commander in the first two episodes, then those concessions would have been given. Yeah.
Maybe the monoids feared the billions of freeze-dried people.
That is a possibility, because their own planet had been destroyed. There were monoids in the freeze-dried storage as well, but the population would have been smaller. Would they have been doomed to slavery for perpetuity? But either way, though, it does seem as if one used lies and propaganda to stir up the mob in order to achieve power for himself, rather than the oppressed masses declaring that they had nothing to lose but their chains. So, yes, the monoids being the rulers of the Ark, as I say, it did appear to me to be much more about one's personal power. The fact that they gave themselves numbers instead of names, quite funny. And yes, killing most of the Guardians in the uprising, keeping them alive. It's a bit of a contrivance. It's also a contrivance how the monoids, particularly one, feel the overwhelming need to explain and expound their evil plot while in front of security cameras. That's another point as well. Oh, no, that the Doctor and his two companions, they were just a legend. Security cameras, video footage, ship's log. And likewise, will our children believe this story, or will they dismiss it as a legend? We can show them the security tapes.
That's quite something. I mean, 700 years is a long time, but I guess they've got it all on microchip. Just rewind.
It should be noted they couldn't hold on to their records about the common cold.
Well, that was millions of years hence, you have to.
They seem to have forgotten the Bible as well, because Dodo gives them the name Ark.
Yeah. But
whereas
that is actually an interesting point, though, at suggesting that, yes, humanity has now existed for so long that the first segment of time is now completely lost to them. But
yes, I say, who thought it was bloody obvious? Dodo sneezes, someone says, we have eradicated all disease from humans, we have no cold. Who wouldn't?
To quote the Punt and Dennis sketch, dead. Of course he didn't die.
But yeah, to talk about, as a kid, I guess it wasn't that predictable. It all goes back to kind of H.G. Wells, because it's what, spoilers, kills for anyone who doesn't know that, it's what kills the Martians, and that's seeded in there. They eradicated. And that didn't occur to the Martians. That, if you go to Earth, get your shots. I think Doctor Who probably has that kind of thing in it more than any other sci-fi. There's quite a lot of stuff to do with diseases and what have you.
Largely because the Doctor is supposed to be first and foremost a scientist.
That's true, yeah.
But so continuing with my long rant, I do strongly agree, though, the second half of the serial is much weaker than the first. As I say, the monoids taking over for no apparent reason except to create a supervillain. Although the cliffhanger, seeing the finished statue and it's got the head of a monoid, or at least an artist's rendition of a monoid head, that is a truly spectacular cliffhanger in itself.
Yeah.
What happened here? But the Refusians on the planet Refusia, Refusis, were butchering the pronunciation so badly here, Coqui, both of us. But
I guess I think refuge, which I'm almost positive that's what it's named after.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they were Refusians, because, the writers thought, okay, well, it's their refusal. They could refuse to allow you to be there.
Exactly. That I was kind of torn between the two of you. But, yes, non-corporeal aliens, just so that we can move the furniture around. So,
interesting that they're like that because of the result of a weapon.
Oh no! It was a solar flare. It was a natural event.
Oh, was it? Oh, apologies. Sorry.
Yeah, just a star. Just a star flared the electromagnetic radiation trapped to them as consciousness that could move things, and yet didn't affect the plant life as far as I can see. But
there could have been invisible plants. You couldn't see them. Sorry, Coqui?
No, I just interjected. Plants were fine, though. But I suppose there could have been tons of invisible plants we didn't see.
But they should have had someone bumping into an invisible tree.
Into the Refusians, they're completely non-corporeal. They can touch you, but you can't touch them because they're perverted like that.
Yeah, that's all a bit sorry, the monoids must have had a way of communicating with each other, so the significance of the voice box is what? Because you have to talk to someone in their own language to occupy them?
Otherwise, how would the audience understand you? Duh.
Oh, good point.
How would they be able to give away their master plan if they couldn't speak?
Yes, okay, well, before we move on to the Dodo segment, I'm going to open up the floor if anyone has any general things to say about the episode.
Yeah, very strong concepts, as I say. Some of the greatest concepts in science fiction in general were employed in this serial, especially in the first half, to great effect. The problem is, while so many other Doctor Who serials were too long, this one was too short. And what were they smoking during the second half? It makes sense to children. It's no. I'm not going to go there. No need for the Moffat Jarvis.
I have it handy.
But yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, sorry.
It could have
cool.
been, it was such a great concept, though. Maybe they had failed to properly inoculate the Guardians, or something had happened to the Guardians. So, in a Planet of the Apes style evolution, the virus had caused the Guardians to devolve intellectually to the point where the monoids had taken over. Not out of hunger for power, but out of benevolence. There was just so many better ways that this serial could have gone in the second half. That it's what you were saying at the beginning of this episode in your tribute to Jane Baker, that if the original writer of the first half had died and somebody had been forced to throw together the second half of the serial, at the last minute, not allowed to see the notes, etc., etc., this is the best they could possibly have done. But for the same writers to start off so well and then descend into passable but still somewhat insulting mediocrity, it does call the whole thing into question, really.
Okay, and Coqui?
No, I thought the Refusians were a really cool idea, and it would be nice, if, I guess, if we had more of them instead of them just being sort of like a solution to the plot, these sort of benevolent, godlike, peaceful creatures looking upon the monoid Guardian conflict. And also, Dodo...
I guess we'll talk about her later.
But yeah,
Dodo's the next. Yeah.
But I feel like even in the second half, there are a lot of ideas that were really interesting that were just not really fleshed out. It'd be nice if they revisited this, but at the same time, it's like,
Yeah, it's for me, it's the best comparison that comes to mind is the recent film version of the book The Fault in Our Stars. Great ideas, lousy execution. That just about sums it up.
It needed more drafts. It might be one of the ones that they rushed into production for some reason.
Well, considering the amount of work that they put into the sets.
That's true, yes.
So I do genuinely get the feeling that this is when, not necessarily the point at which the are we a drama or are we a kid show dilemma began, but it is where it really started to take root, possibly.
We are being a bit harsh on the writing, given that if the exact script went into production as a big Hollywood movie this year, the standard of the writing would actually be quite high.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. I am comparing it. What is the one thing that sums up my opinion of all writing fiction literature. Oh, you, James, your standards are too high. No, everyone else's standards are too low. Saying that it's better than a modern Hollywood movie. Sorry, that's not a praise. That's a reason to despair for the state of humanity.
And on that bombshell, I'm just going to say one thing is the Refusians have agreed to let humans and monoids live there. I want to see the bit where somebody mentions, like, they've got fucking elephants. Yes, these are the 5 million species we brought with us.
Yeah, that is one important point. When you're going to another planet to restart the ecosystem, what about the ecosystem that's already there?
Yeah, I just...
So, how's this life, though? They are just props. The Refusians made that pretty clear.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I just think, yeah, the elephants are going to eat all of the invisible plants. And one thing, a bit of trivia. Actually, Coqui, you have permission to shake the new series jar. You can both see my icon, which is also going to be my icon in my avatar. Yes, which, yes, New Who has referred. Yep, there you go. Has referred back to Monoid, the Doctor. Even though it's about 1,000 or two, it's well over 1,000 years apart on the Doctor's timeline by this point. The Doctor, when entertaining the children of Trenzalore, made various puppets, including a monoid. So it's possible he's met them again. It's possible the children of Trenzalore would recognise a monoid. I don't know, but from what we see, he only had this one encounter to go by. Maybe he told the whole story of the Ark as a puppet show. It's a fanciful idea. So yeah, so a bit of fan wank that you could have blinked and missed last Christmas.
Oh. I didn't know what the monoids were at the time.
Yeah.
Noticed that's a cool touch.
It's a monoid, and you may notice it's green. And I've checked some color production pictures, and yes, the monoids were green.
Yes. Yes. And at the same time, whilst dropping minor hints to little Easter eggs for the fanboys. Let's rewrite the conclusion of Evil of the Daleks from the Patrick Troughton era, but pretend that it's entirely original, or even better, rewrite Dalek from the Christopher Eccleston era and pretend that it's entirely original. How can we do that? By ripping off Inner Space as well.
I'm gonna have to link He Who Moans channel. Yes. Okay. Why did I have to mention the new series?
You could have gone the entire podcast, but no. You stuck the knife in, and I just had to give it a twist.
I can't stop myself mentioning fan trivia.
It's a specific form of Tourette syndrome.
Now, interestingly, when me and James watched The Ark last year, we came to the conclusion that Jackie Lane was a southerner pretending to sound like she was from the north. And we were completely wrong. She was born and raised in Manchester and was one of the first Coronation Street characters. In fact, Doctor Who basically headhunted her, or basically talent spotted her, rather than her auditioning. They, I think, wanted to cash in because the BBC was very stuffy in those days. Coronation Street, by the way, Coqui, is the biggest soap opera here. It's actually been going since 1960, so it's even older than Doctor Who. So to be Cheryl in the original cast of Coronation Street is quite amazing. Coronation Street was ITV, so it's competition. It's commercial television, so some people would have been snobby towards it. And Coronation Street shocked people, because they were used to everybody on television talking like this, even if they're meant to be common, you know? And Coronation Street had people who sounded like working class northerners, bloody and bastard and all that. And
basically Game of Thrones.
So it was get her. Although apparently some people at the BBC missed the point, and they tried to make her fake having a more standard English accent. But the whole point was Dodo is different because she's the first working class companion, and the first companion to have any kind of regional accent. What's interesting, however, is that 3 years earlier, Jackie Lane was the first choice for Susan, and she turned them down. So, Jackie Lane, whether she would have still played it, because it's quite weird, because you may notice that the Doctor says, "Oh, can't you improve your English?" And it's sort of like, we know the Ninth Doctor is going to be a working class Manc. So what would he think upon meeting the Ninth Doctor? It would have been quite funny if they'd had in the very first episode, An Earthly Child, if they'd had that line, "If you're an alien, how come it sounds like you're from the North?" Lots of planets have a North. Oh, new series, Jar.
That's a couple of references. But yeah.
Yeah, so, indeed, yes, technically 2 shakes, yeah. And, so, yeah, she actually didn't act for very long after she left Doctor Who. She became a theatrical agent, which she is to this day. Not only did she manage the late Nick Courtney, who was Brett Bryan, who would go on to play the Brigadier, also Janet Fielding, who will one day play Tegan, and, in fact, she's Tom Baker's agent. So, even if you don't like Jackie Lane as Dodo, she's the agent to whom we owe Tom Baker ever being put up for the part of the Doctor, which has now just made Jackie Lane one of James's favourite people. So yes, interesting thing there. So she's Tom Baker's agent now. And I may try and dig out a Coronation Street appearance, because even though I don't really watch soap operas, it's an interesting piece of... obviously, at the time, Coronation Street was an amazing, groundbreaking thing. And it's so big in the UK that when Sir Derek Jacobi, and James will be mostly familiar with Sir Derek Jacobi for his Claudius in the Kenneth Branagh Hamlet. It's that level of greatness, that stature, I do mean stature, I can't talk today, of actor, Sir Derek Jacobi, when he appeared in Doctor Who, finally, technically new series reference, but what he said in the interview was, as an actor, he had 2 lifelong ambitions. One was Doctor Who, and the other was Corrie, or we call Coronation Street Corrie here. And it's that level. It's Doctor Who and Coronation Street were the lifelong acting ambitions of Sir Derek Jacobi. And, yeah. So, my opinion of her as a character, besides the fact that... Right, okay, look. You didn't just hire somebody with an identifiably working class and northern regional accent. You've written her so that she continually points out the bloody obvious, or just draws attention to things. Sometimes it's really obvious that she's got a line for the sake of giving her a line. The only real contribution she makes to the story is that she sneezes and infects people, which technically Stephen and the Doctor could have done. No, she has a cold, that's her function in this. And when she points out the obvious, like, they can talk now, they couldn't before. Yes, Dodo, everybody missed that, thank you. And yeah, so at this point they're not writing her terribly well, but I do think, given that we often talk about things like gender roles and the sexes, and we talked about race a bit, remember, it's 1960s Britain, you've got to talk about class as well. Some people will have tuned in and gone, hang on, is this ITV? No, this isn't the Life Channel, it's the BBC, and they've got a common person on. People would genuinely have had, even when I grew up in the 80s, there were some of us aspidistra classes, or lower middle class people, who still had the attitude that you could let children watch TV as long as it was BBC. And my dad had a huge snobbery towards commercial television. And it meant that you had, because Doctor Who back in my day, in the 80s, Doctor Who was opposite the A-Team, which of course was an important American show, on the Light Channel. So you had Doctor Who kids and you had A-Team kids. The weird thing being that Doctor Who in the 80s was far more violent than the A-Team, but somehow respectable when the A-Team somehow wasn't. So to give a bit of an insight there into class attitudes, so that's where I think Dodo is groundbreaking as a character, but lots of privately educated, Eton Harrow, Oxbridge, tweed-wearing, middle-aged men are trying to write her, and all the slang she uses, fab, rad, she says gear as an adjective. That's so gear. I'm going to ask my mother about that. So they know about 60s clothes, they know about the 60s young person slang, but they are over-egging the pudding a bit character-wise. But anyway, Coqui, your thoughts on Dodo and her first outing as a companion?
I think you covered it pretty well. She didn't really contribute a whole lot. She could have, though. That's the thing. Like, when you look at the ending of the second episode, she's the one who's the voice of reason. That's like, shouldn't you make sure this turns out well? Don't you think it's a little premature to be applying the medicine to everyone, because the doctor, he was overconfident. Not a very good scientist, in this either. But, the whole, it could have been like, the doctor is overconfident and has a bit of a serving of humble pie because Dodo, who's supposed to be, the group dunce, spotted out what needed to be mentioned. But they don't even, go to that. They're like, oh, yeah, you were right. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. It's just, forget it. And I will say that I do like that she isn't as submissive as Vicky or Susan. She does... she seems to be speaking more on her own, and it's not like this whole children should be seen, not heard BS that I think Vicky and Susan kind of embodied. Here, she said what she wanted, and the doctor's like, I need to teach you how to speak properly, young lady. So in that sense, she has a somewhat, I wouldn't say better dynamic. No, I do say, I like this dynamic more than Susan or Vicky, but at the same time, she is written rather poorly. And, actually, I was going to ask about, her slang, but, okay, so it was overdone. People in the 60s in the UK didn't speak like that.
Yeah, they want to put the cool youth speak in her mouth with every sentence. People did say fab, and they might still today. Rad is one I know of. Rad, short for radical, because of course radical means really good or excellent. We know this. Gear, as I say, I'm going to ask my mum, because she grew up in a remote town in the 60s. She didn't grow up in a big city in the 60s, which very different things. Another thing to point out, of course, is because of the Beatles. This is actually something that James pointed out a while back. This is the era of Beatlemania. In fact, the Beatles were actually Doctor Who fans. It's just that Brian Epstein, their manager, wouldn't let them appear in the show. But John Lennon was a massive fan. But so you've got two things. You've got Doctor Who mania, you've got Beatles mania. So northern working class young person says cool. Particularly if they're already well to the audience of the time. She's what was the name of the character? She's somebody, Cheryl. She'll be Cheryl from Coronation Street. So she kind of ticks all these boxes for appeal.
But the problem is, though, as you pointed out, it was just her character was just handled so badly, precisely because she was being created by middle-aged men, trying to make her sound cool. She was the Poochie of Doctor Who at the end of the day. If you remember the... Sorry?
Do we need a Simpsons jar?
Yeah, but I was just going to say it's the Simpsons reference, the episode where...
right, gotcha.
Where they introduce a new character to Itchy and Scratchy just to add appeal. But Yes, it was Beatles mania, so of course she has to be from the north. We're trying to appeal to teenagers. So just like the Director General's mother-in-law saying, no, the Daleks' master plan should be a 12-parter because you have to cash in on Dalek mania. This is Moffat's mentors, the people who he looks up to, saying, yes, bleed the teenage fangirl market until it's white.
Okay.
Of course, in the 60s, I think the things like market research and Twitter didn't exist. So there was no way for these middle-aged men to actually just go on Wikipedia and find out if people did say gear as an adjective or not.
Because
these young kids...
I was going to say, because heaven forbid they actually have cultural consultants and actually speak with young girls because they don't have anything good to say.
Oh, but that's the point, though. Television back then was nowhere near as sophisticated. I remember explaining in a previous podcast episode of Doctor Who Fridays that one of the best examples of the way that television worked in the 1960s was when the Monty Python team went into the office of the head of BBC Comedy to ask for a series. He asked for the scripts. They hadn't written them yet. Will there be music? We don't know. Will you have special guests? We don't know. Okay, you're having 13 episodes, but you're not getting any more.
And we are going to have a Monty Python jar.
Yeah. But no, that is a relevant point, though. I hope you'll agree with me, because then it was just stabs in the dark, whereas today no one at the BBC in general, no matter what they're making, can sneeze or blow their noses without checking the demographics, the market research, and the feedback on Twitter.
I am going to throw in one other nerdy fact, is that the reason for Doctor Who's existence was that they had a 25-minute gap between the Saturday football match. Although actually, surely the football must have overrun, so Doctor Who must have been on late quite a lot in the 60s. But it would have gone after the football and before Jukebox Jury, which would have been the biggest pop music show in the UK at the time. So these people had some media savvy. So there would have been some sense of, what's Jukebox Jury?
Absolutely. They were deliberately attempting, as I say, to appeal to the teenage market, the people who would have been tuning in to see what was at the top of the hit parade, as they would have called it back then. But that was precisely the point, though, Alex, because, yes, they would have known that teenagers were tuning in to watch Jukebox Jury, so that the whole point of Dodo was to try and appeal to that demographic, to try and get them to tune in 25 minutes earlier to watch Doctor Who as well. The problem was, though, as we've been discussing, they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the consultants, so while they had the savvy, as you put it, they were just flying on a wing and a prayer, and they ended up over-egging the pudding.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll open up the floor if anybody has any last remarks to make about Dodo. Oh, actually, that was the implicit question. Because I know Coqui wasn't so keen on Carol Ann Ford. Jackie Lane was first choice for Susan. So going, Coqui, what do you think of if Jackie Lane had played Susan?
Because I mean, I really didn't like Susan, and I do, from what little I've seen of present Dodo, I might prefer her to Susan, but she wouldn't play Dodo, she would play Susan, which is,
well, yeah.
Also the short haircut is like, oh, he looks like Susan. It's like, well, at least now they're being transparent about it. She is Susan 3. But this is the thing. She's considerably more un-Susan-like than Vicky was. You know.
Yeah.
But going back to the point you were making about Susan and Vicky being submissive, Susan, yes, you definitely have a point, but remember, Vicky is what started this whole youth revolution thing. Remember, the serial The Space Museum, that was the entire subtext of the series. It was the premise, the secondary premise beyond the predestination storyline. Could they alter fate? The fact that Vicky was starting a teenage revolution on this planet, cough, cough, social commentary, cough. But yes, so in that, you talked about them being submissive and just following along and so on and so forth. Yes, there are a couple of scenes, especially the one in the Crusades when the Doctor literally sits Vicky on his knee to say, there, child, I want to punch him. But no, when we were talking about the Time Meddler, yes, she was much more the mother figure to Susan, to Stephen in a way. So, oh God, what kind of trouble is that idiot going to get himself into now? Sorry. I just have to quote it because it's one of my favourite scenes. Well, for breakfast we've got blackberries or more blackberries. But it's just that it was in the later series. No, I do mean later in the classic series, in a couple of decades' time. There'll be the transfer between the transition between Peter Davison's Doctor and Colin Baker's portrayal of the Doctor is such a massive pendulum swing. They might as well have used the pendulum to smash the Doctor Who fans in the face. It was no. We're being too much of this, so we're going to completely overcompensate. So. The problem with Dodo was that she went right past independent, shot straight past assertive, and then buried herself face first like a torpedo into downright bloody irritating.
Yeah. I guess. No, I mean, you're right there. You're definitely right. When I said Vicky, I just meant more with her relationship to the Doctor, that she always seemed to sort of be kowtowing to him.
Oh, yes. And as I say, that was one of my least favourite things about him. So, yes, having a female character stand up to the Doctor, something that we will see in later series. In the classic series, don't shake the bloody jar.
It is. I guess I'll shake it for myself there. But yeah.
It's the fact that basically the actress who plays Dodo is so much older than either Susan or Vicky appeared. She looks as if she's in her mid-20s.
She was 19.
Oh, well, she doesn't look it. But still, the idea that the fact that the Doctor still refers to Dodo as the child, telling Stephen to stay here and look after the child.
Yes, which is interesting because I was thinking of the conundrum from last week, where we were wrong because yes. Just to phone emergency services, you'd open the pull-to-open flap on a police box, which would actually directly connect you, so you could actually use a police box to it's automatically dialing 999 when you lift the receiver. But what happened? A medical emergency. St John's, a voluntary. There would have been a first aid kit, so she could have been a member of the St John's ambulance, which 19's old enough to have trained. So she could be a volunteer paramedic for St John's ambulance. She could have gone there to get a first aid kit. It's just that she'd be a very bad member of St John's if she ended up thinking, screw the kid anyway. But so she's the only reason she would even try and open the door, and she would have a police box key. So what? Police box keys work on the TARDIS, do they? They were very distinctive police box keys. Wouldn't look anything like a standard Yale lock. But clearly she would have to be responsible enough to be a member of St John's ambulance, and now she's being treated like a child. But there you go.
It should be noted that in America, if you dial 999, you get Herman Cain instituting a flat tax.
If you ever see a police box in America, don't use it. We have a problem over here because we get so many American films and TV shows that people have died because young people think that our emergency services number is 911, and rather than spend millions on an advertising campaign telling anybody under 20 that it's 999 in this country, they've made it so that 911 also works in the UK now. So a tip for you people out there. Sorry?
Then the terrorists have already won.
Or should I just say, thanks, Obama?
Exactly. But, interesting tips though, because people in the UK don't try it. Don't try it. But just if there is an emergency, 911 will now work apparently. Anyway, so without further ado, I think it's time. Coqui, your final thought and goodbye.
My final thoughts are elephants are awesome, and I'm wondering where they've shot this. If they did go to a zoo for it, but I guess I can look into this later.
You can get an elephant in a
I mean, cool idea. Like really, a lot of effort into the set, and it looks really good. And the costumes were pretty decent, but those will be my final thoughts. Yeah, and may the hamster, improve your day.
I think he probably was shot in the studio, and I know Blue Peter had a baby elephant on once, and this may not have been a fully grown Indian elephant because they do get a lot bigger than that. I just remember in Blue Peter the baby elephant pooing on the floor, but that's live TV for you.
You just had to mention that, didn't you, Alex?
Of course, a piece of British television history, and anyway, yes. So James, your final thought and goodbye.
Great concept. The serial was too short, and whilst it failed ultimately in some respects, failure due to over-ambition is better than infinitely better than failure because you threw the script together on the train to Crewe, were on your way to host another interview or attend another fan convention before going off to write Sherlock. But
I saw the Sherlock coming too. I had the
But yes, who could I possibly have been referring to there? But yes, just so much squandered potential, which in a way makes it hurt even more. But at the end of the day, neither the best serial nor the worst. We must take our hats off to the BBC for again, things such as this, the Web Planet, the fact that they were trying to break boundaries, the fact that in the first two episodes especially, the writers were breaking new science fiction ground and asking serious questions. And also, can we also salute the first real example on British television of a minority group being included in spite of their disabilities. But, so, yes, may the great holy donkey of inclusiveness and social justice bless your house for 7 generations.
I'm now wondering how monoids... I can accept monoids having one eye, but why would a creature evolve not to have a mouth? Well, they must eat in some other way, I suppose. We don't see them eat.
Oh, we see the empty plates when the subject guardians are serving them, taking the plate and glass away. So I think their mouths must be on where our foreheads would be,
underneath all that hair.
Exactly. So it's like trying to eat with the bushiest beard.
Sorry, Coqui?
No, I said that's better than what I was thinking.
And on that note, oh, yes, of course, right, yes, almost forgot. So, next episode, The Celestial Toymaker. Ooh, wow, ooh.